would like to take this opportunity to thank you and appreciate you for honoring our invitation. Those of you who are watching this on our social media platforms, you are welcome also. We are aware that there are people also who are listening to this briefing or following it on radio, on Ubuntu Radio and other platforms. We would also like to welcome the viewers who are following this briefing live on television. The Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, is going to address a statement, following which we will take questions. The Minister is today supported by the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Alvin Waters, as well as the Director General of the Department, Mr. Khabo Mahwai. On that note, once again, thank you for joining us, and you are welcome. We will be taking questions. Meme is monitoring the social media platforms as well as the other platforms where journalists are following the briefing, and we'll take your questions from here after the Minister has read the statement. Minister, over to you.
Thank you, DDG Mungela. I assume all the microphones are on and working. Good morning, everyone. Morning to colleagues from the media, and good morning to all who join us at this briefing. We thought that we should do an end-of-year briefing because many people have been wondering what has been happening with respect to foreign policy implementation and international relations matters in this very unusual year of the pandemic COVID-19. Allow me to begin by expressing the condolences of the government and people of South Africa to the government and people of Eswatini following the sad passing of Prime Minister Dlamini of Eswatini. We express our deep regret and our condolences at this sad loss. Well, all of us would be aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a dramatic impact on all our lives during this particular year. It has affected the way we live, the way we work, and the way we interact with each other. It has made us aware that no person or nation can thrive in isolation. Despite the separation and interruptions to international contact that has been created by the pandemic, we in the international sector have been able to continue our international work. This approach of always working with others resonates with South Africa's foreign policy, which is driven by a vision to achieve a just and equitable world and an African continent that is peaceful, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, united, and prosperous. As far back as 1955, the Congress of the People adopted the Freedom Charter, envisioning a South Africa free from the oppression of apartheid, wherein all the people who live and work in it enjoy human rights and fundamental freedoms. The Freedom Charter also envisaged a South Africa that works with all nations of the world to build global peace, friendship, and substantive justice and equality for all people. These values and ideals underpin democratic South Africa's foreign policy. During this year, we have worked along with all nations of the world to address the effects of the pandemic and find solutions to our common challenges, which include conflict, underdevelopment, responses to climate change, and addressing humanitarian disasters. We have therefore played our role in various leadership positions in global and continental governance institutions and strengthened our bilateral relations as we continue to pursue a foreign policy grounded by the fundamental values in our Constitution, which promote a safe, peaceful, just, fair and prosperous South Africa, region, Africa and the world. On our responses to the impact of COVID-19, you would recall that in this year, in April, the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, stated that the COVID-19 pandemic would be a humanitarian crisis that would see people suffering, sick, and scared. He called for increased levels of cooperation and solidarity from all nations of the world. At a special session of the United Nations General Assembly focused on COVID-19 on the 3rd of December this year, President Ramaphosa stated that the acts of international solidarity since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic were indeed phenomenal and proved that no country could operate from a position of isolation. President Ramaphosa's statement, 8 months after the Secretary General of the UN made the call for global cooperation to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, indicated that most countries and indeed the institutions of global governance have been responsive to the Secretary General's call. As chair of the African Union, South Africa initiated a coordinated Africa response that focused on addressing the immediate challenges to the public health systems in Africa and measures to mitigate the economic and humanitarian crisis. This included establishing a COVID-19 response fund and launching an African medical supplies platform to ensure all countries have access to the necessary equipment and supplies. The African Union has also developed a vaccine strategy for the continent and established a COVID-19 African Vaccine Acquisition Task Team, AVAT, in support of the African Vaccine Strategy. The task team is tasked to ensure that COVID-19 vaccines are available for Africa. Building on the call made by the Secretary General in April, the African Union has also called for a comprehensive economic stimulus package for Africa and the suspension of interest payments on Africa's external and public debt. Despite the progress made in cooperation and with many countries experiencing a second wave of the pandemic, global attention is now shifting to access to vaccines and their approval for use. There are fears that the richer countries of the globe may hoard vaccine stocks despite earlier agreements and use intellectual property rights to block access to vaccines by developing countries. Vaccine nationalism is seen as a very real threat, as it could create supply problems for poorer countries, thus denying their citizens access to what might be life-saving vaccines. Our African Union Commission and the African Center for Disease Control are giving close attention to this trend and seeking ways of ensuring all African countries enjoy access. Of course, defeating this virus still requires countries to collaborate with each other and to work with multilateral institutions to ensure that all people access the required health and medical interventions, and that they benefit from economic and social measures required for a sustained response to the pandemic. We also continue, as South Africa, working within the AU on the post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy for Africa. On our diplomatic footprint in the region and the globe, our interests in the Southern African Development Community and the rest of our continent are driven by the values and ideals that I outlined earlier. We require and want a region and an African continent that is peaceful, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, united, and prosperous. Of course, much work still needs to be done to achieve this vision. Far too many of our people live in situations where there is instability, violence, and conflict. This includes the situations in Libya, the Sahel, in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, South Sudan, and in Eastern DRC. We are also concerned by the recent developments relating to the situation in Western Sahara. This relates to the recently announced United States recognition of Morocco's rights of sovereignty over Western Sahara. This announcement goes against international law and the African Union's Constitutive Act. These developments may very well further fuel hostilities between Morocco and the Sahrawi people. Silencing the guns in these situations requires dealing with the root causes of conflicts, which invariably include governance deficits, human rights abuses, and contestation over national resources. Our recent AU summit this month agreed that the role of foreign interests in conflicts on the African continent needs far greater and deliberate attention. All this being said, and despite the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, our continent still presents significant economic opportunities for international and South African investors, particularly in the sectors of mining, agriculture, agro-processing, telecommunications, infrastructure, hospitality, and tourism, which we believe will form a strong part of the economic recovery strategies of South Africa and the continent. Maximizing these opportunities is important, as building our regional economy will be a key contributor to peace and stability. We've also built very strong relations with the Asia region. We've noted that the Asia region has managed to limit the economic harm that has affected most other regions of the world as a result of measures they took to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. And Asia is projected to have the strongest regional rebound of any region of the globe, projected at 8% growth in 2021, according to the IMF. This is good for continuing the robust trade and investment that our country, South Africa, enjoys with countries in the Asia region. An indicator of this is that the total two-way trade with Asia and the Middle East, inclusive of Oceania, breached the important milestone of 1 trillion rand for the first time in 2019. And with South Africa having recently acceded to the Treaty of Amity with the ASEAN region, we anticipate increased opportunities for further collaboration with the key Indo-Pacific regional actors. This provides a strategic platform for enhanced trade and economic initiatives with a wider range of Asian partners. As is the case with the Western Sahara issue I discussed earlier, there are recent developments that are undermining the internationally agreed parameters to end the occupation of Palestine based on the outcome of two viable states. This includes the dilution of the Arab Peace Initiative agreed to by the Arab League in 2002, which linked the normalization of relations with Israel with its withdrawal from the occupied territories. South Africa will continue to foreground the importance of multilateral-led initiatives to end the occupation, so that people on both sides of the 1967 Green Line enjoy freedom, peace, dignity, and justice. Our country has also continued to enjoy strong and mutually beneficial relations with countries in Europe, South America, and North America. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we have strong cultural, social, and economic ties with all countries in that region. We are concerned, though, that Cuba and Venezuela remain severely affected by unilateral sanctions outside of the legalities provided for sanctions by the UN Charter. The United States also remains a strategic trade and investment partner, with partnerships for South Africa in key areas such as health, education, transport, environment, science and technology, and energy. Exports of goods and services and income from U.S. investments in South Africa amounts to over $412 billion per year. We also enjoy very cordial relations with Canada. Canada's development assistance is targeted towards South Africa's domestic priorities such as health, education, governance, and capacity building. South Africa and Canada are both strong supporters of multilateralism and collaborate at the level of the United Nations and other multilateral fora on issues such as climate change, human rights, shared and inclusive growth, gender empowerment, and peace and security. We enjoy mature and excellent relations with the Nordic countries. These are based on mutual respect, human rights, dialogue, consultation, and cooperation, with a very strong emphasis on supporting South Africa's drive to greater autonomy in these fields. All the Nordic countries are active on the African agenda and have prioritized African issues in their recently announced foreign policies. This includes they seek to expand diplomatic relations on the continent, to expand trade and investment, to provide expanded development support, to be involved directly in peacemaking and conflict resolution, youth development, the promotion of women, cooperation on climate change, and the promotion of a more just and equitable international system. It is our intention to further exploit opportunities in innovative sectors such as energy, climate change, digitalization, agriculture, water management, and oceans management with this region. We also look forward to strengthening bilateral and economic ties with Turkey as we prepare to host in 2021 the inaugural South Africa-Turkey Binational Commission. We have built very good cooperation with Russia as our strategic partner bilaterally and within formations such as BRICS and in the UN, amongst other multilateral fora. The country is South Africa's fourth largest trading partner in BRICS. However, although bilateral trade with Russia has increased significantly from $2.9 billion in 2010 to $13.1 billion in 2019, we believe it remains below potential, and we are working very hard to boost our economic relations and bring them to a high level. We are doing this through our structured mechanism, the Intergovernmental Committee on Trade and Economic Cooperation, which I co-chair with the Trade Minister of Russia. Other countries in the Central and Eastern Europe region demonstrate great potential for expansion in trade and economic relations with South Africa, and we intend to explore these opportunities further in 2021. Of course, the countries of Western Europe remain critical for South Africa's economic development. These countries include some of our major foreign investors, our largest trading partners, and largest sources of tourism. Some 2,000 European companies represented in South Africa are also a major source of employment and skills development here. Countries in the region have been supportive of South Africa and Africa's efforts to combat COVID and have provided test kits and other forms of assistance to all African countries. We are pleased to have been part of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine research program. The European Union is still the largest economic bloc in the world, accounting for 25% of global GDP and around 20% of global trade. And they are South Africa's largest and leading trading partner as a bloc. Total trade has increased from 150 billion rands in 2000 to 693 billion in 2019. Despite that, there still remains a declining trade deficit and an ongoing negative trade balance. Exports to the EU have increased steadily over the years, but we'd like to see more. They grew from 64 billion in 2000 to 319 billion in 2019. On matters of global governance, the world today is changing at a very fast rate. Changes affect international relations and how countries relate to each other and position themselves on the global stage. It is an integral part of our work as diplomats to monitor the shifting global dynamics and challenges. Aside from the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, the rise of trade wars, increasing protectionism, nationalism, and populism, and an inward-looking focus in some countries' domestic priorities, these have been challenges to our collective efforts for change through multilateral institutions. While we believe this may change with the anticipated re-engagement with the multilateral system by the United States in 2021, we as South Africa will continue to work to strengthen and indeed reform the institutions of global governance. Our 2-year services as an unelected member of the United Nations Security Council concludes at the end of December, a month in which we are serving as chair of the Council. Many observers, including member states and think tanks, have suggested that South Africa's third term at the UNSC was particularly successful. We demonstrated through our votes and engagements with other Council members that our stance is independent of global political blocs and that our values and characteristics, as shaped by our struggle against colonialism and apartheid, which now underpin our constitutional principles, determine how we engage on issues pertaining to peace, security, development, and human rights. The fact that we were consistent on matters in the UNSC and across the UN system strengthened our role as bridge builder and justified a more permanent role for South Africa and other African countries at the Security Council. Our term as chair of the African Union coincided with our role at the Security Council. We use this opportunity to champion African issues at the United Nations and to foster closer collaboration on matters relating to peace and security between the UNSC and the AU. South Africa also prioritized the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which seeks to eliminate trade barriers and is expected to enhance competitiveness and stimulate investment, innovation, and economic growth on the continent. We were very pleased at agreement to begin implementing the AFCA in 2021 and believe this is an extremely positive development for our continent. We will also continue to utilize our membership of fora such as BRICS, IPSA, and IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, to advance reform of the global political and economic architecture and create deliverables through the emerging role of the new development bank. We also will promote cooperation in health and innovation, trade, tourism, and investment, and continue with our efforts along with Africa to reform the UNSC. South Africa needs international support, and in particular requires investments and support for debt relief to deliver our President's vision of accelerated industrialization, women's empowerment, and youth employment. We plan to focus 2021 on economic reconstruction and recovery implementation, alongside a continuing focus on the pandemic and responses to it. One of the challenges that we faced as DIRCO in 2020, and I close with this, was the repatriation of our nationals who found themselves stranded outside of South Africa due to lockdowns that were implemented by many countries, including South Africa, in our attempt to curb the spread of the virus. From the time the President announced South Africa's Level 5 lockdown on the 15th of March 2020, to the time when international travel was again allowed under Level 1, our department, through our consular services, managed to repatriate just over 30,000 South Africans who were stranded in all corners of the world. We did this using over 350 flights. The number excludes tens of thousands who used our land borders and who were involved in this process. I know many officials spent sleepless nights working 7 days a week trying to bring our fellow citizens back to their loved ones. This experience has made us realize the importance of making sure that we equip all South Africans who intend traveling abroad during this season with information that might help them not to find themselves needing to be repatriated because they're stranded. Some pointers we wish to suggest are: one, that countries in the Northern Hemisphere are encountering a second wave of the pandemic. South Africans should be cautious in traveling to these countries, as you may become distressed or even destitute abroad, depending on the levels of lockdown in the respective countries, and with the likelihood of international flights that might be cancelled at short notice. Please do be aware that if you do travel, you travel at your own risk to these countries, knowing the current circumstances and the uncertainty associated with that. Please ensure that you are familiar with the immigration and health entry requirements of the country you will visit, and South Africa's entry health requirements during the pandemic. If you have any uncertainty regarding the entry health requirements of the country you will be visiting, then please do contact their embassy in South Africa for assistance. If you need any clarity on the health entry requirements upon your return to South Africa, we ask you to consult the website of the Department of Health. Second, please ensure you have adequate travel insurance. Many South Africans had no or inadequate travel insurance during the peak of the pandemic earlier this year. It couldn't cover extended hotel accommodation, nor could it cover new flight tickets and other costs. 3, when you arrive at the country you're traveling to, please register with our embassies abroad. The contact particulars of all our embassies are available on DIRCO's website at www.dirco.gov.za, all lowercase. South Africans are encouraged to register via the email addresses provided, as some of our officials might be working remotely due to local lockdown regulations and will not be always available to take your calls. Inform your family or next of kin of your destination and the duration of your stay. 4, ensure that you meet the immigration requirements of the country you wish to visit, as countries have revised their visa regimes during the global pandemic. 5, read thoroughly on the country you intend visiting, as the global situation is unstable. If the country you visit is a high-risk one, consider postponing your visit or proceeding with caution if travel is unavoidable. 6, know the COVID-19 protocols of the country you intend visiting, and should you not comply, you might be refused entry. Although not yet common, many airlines may likely require proof of COVID-19 vaccinations before allowing commencement of travel. Currently, only a COVID-19 negative test is compulsory. And finally, travel well, be safe, and exercise extra care and caution this festive season. And as DIRCO, we wish all who are following us today well over the festive season. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now have an opportunity to take questions. Forms, and then we'll come to... All right, let's start in the room. Nicholas is begging. And the media house you're representing, and then we get your question. Nicholas.
Okay. Klaus Bauer here from Newsroom Africa. Thank you very much for conclusive update on where things stand as we end 2020. 2 quick ones from me. Any comment, and I apologize if I've missed it in any way, shape or form, on the passing of Prime Minister Ambrose Dlamini? And also, does DIRCO and you as the Minister in charge of the department have any update whatsoever on Shepherd Bushiri and the matter that is unfolding there? Thank you.
Thank you, DDG. We have a question from Mia Lindiki, Eyewitness News. The question is, 400 people are missing in Nigeria after an attack with AK-47s on a government science secondary school on Friday. What information do we have on this? Are there any plans to offer help from South Africa? And we have another question from Karen Duplessis, Media 24. She says, during a recent telephonic press briefing, the U.S. coordinator for counterterrorism, Ambassador at Large Nathan Sayers, after his recent visit to Mozambique and South Africa, was asked what was the assessment of Pretoria's state of preparedness and readiness to deal with associated increased terror-linked activities in Cabo Delgado. While Ambassador Sayers was reluctant to speak on behalf of South Africa, he felt that South Africa has a similar view to that of the U.S. He added that South Africa has a special role to play as an economic and military power in setting the tone and example for other African countries. Does the minister share this view? And if not, what is the official view on the increased terror-linked activities in neighboring states, especially Mozambique, and the role that South Africa will or must play? We also have another question from Molefe Seleza, the citizen. Can the minister give us an update on the extradition process of Shepard Bushiri and his wife, and including the timelines?
Right, John Pulse, allow the minister to respond, and then
Good morning, Nicholas. I think they did tell me you were having trouble getting here. I don't know whether the traffic was heavy, but we did begin with expressing condolences on the passing of Premier Dlamini, Prime Minister Dlamini of Eswatini. I think it's very sad. He came to South Africa, having had, I think, some weeks of illness related to COVID-19, and we deeply, sympathize with the people of Eswatini at his loss. On the matter of Mr. Bushiri, I do not have any update. The extradition matters are dealt with by the Department of Justice, and we would, of course, assist them with transmitting any documentation or requests to the Malawi government. Suffice it to say, despite the statement in the Sunday Independent 3 weeks ago that I assisted in the escape of Mr. Bushiri, this is a total lie, and I deny it with the contempt that it deserves. On the matter of 400 pupils missing, I think this is very sad, and for me, this illustrates the urgent need for SADC to determine support to Mozambique in combating the insurgency that is currently underway in that country. Because you don't want to have a situation where such banditry becomes a regular feature of practices in the country, because then it poses a threat to all communities and all persons. I am hopeful that these pupils will be found and that they'll be returned to their families safe. I understand it is mainly young boys who have been kidnapped, and it would appear from what we have heard in the media, and it's mainly media that we're getting information from at present, that extortion is the underlying reason for this kidnapping. But we sincerely hope that the early successes that the government of Nigeria has indicated with respect to identifying some of the kidnappers, that this will lead to the return of those children. Well, to Karine du Plessis, clearly I cannot agree with the ambassador at large as I'm not sure what views we share, according to him, with the United States. What we do believe in is we cannot allow terrorism. We believe terrorism is a threat to peace and security, and that we should fight with our security forces any attempts to introduce terrorism in the region and in our country, and that our security forces must be marshaled to ensure that no terrorist gets a foothold in our country. So our role with respect to any instance of terrorism or any form of insurgency would be to provide support to a sovereign state as might be asked for by them, because we cannot impose ourselves. And I know that the government of South Africa stands ready to work closely with Mozambique to provide assistance. And I also believe our own security forces stand at readiness to defend our country should the need arise. Timelines on the extradition. DG, I know the DGs have been having some discussion. Are there timelines?
Not yet, Minister.
No, we don't have any as yet.
Handled.
I think we will ask the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services whether he shouldn't have a similar briefing just to let us know where matters stand.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. Nene?
We have a question from Claire Berthelot from Radio France International. And she says, about the situation in the Western Sahara, Minister, do you believe in the possibility of negotiations? And how will South Africa continue to support the Sahrawi population and its right to self-determination? We also have a question from Paul Vesciato from Bloomberg News. He says, this year has also been marked by rising tensions between India and China, including a couple of border clashes between the two. Does South Africa see this as a potential threat to destabilizing BRICS? And what is South Africa's official policy on this matter? News 24 on Botswana. Could the Minister please give us an update on the progress made with the request for mutual legal assistance by Botswana in relation to the alleged money laundering in the Maswabi butterfly case?
Okay. I'm allowing you to finish all the questions because this is the last round.
And then on Morocco, it's from Karim Duplessis again. How will the recognition of the United States of Western Sahara as part of Morocco influence South Africa's diplomatic relationship with the United States? Will South Africa take any steps or apply sanctions in this regard? These are all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister?
Well, on Western Sahara, South Africa remains committed to supporting the cause of the people of Sahrawi in seeking self-determination and freedom from what are occupying forces of Morocco, as stated very clearly in a number of resolutions of the United Nations. So we hold to the position of the United Nations resolutions that the people of Western Sahara must be allowed an opportunity to determine their own freedom and course of history. We have always advocated negotiations. This is part of our policy and practice as South Africa. We fully supported the African Union's decision that a delegation would proceed to the occupied territories and to Morocco to engage both sides in an effort to draw them together toward discussing final settlement. And we remain distressed that this, despite being a very old decision of the AU has not been agreed to by Morocco. So our support will always be for the cause of the people of Western Sahara. We will continue to speak on their behalf on the international platforms that we have an opportunity to speak on. We will continue to work in solidarity with Sahrawi and to offer their people any form of humanitarian support that they may need from South Africa. On the tensions between India and China, in the BRICS Forum, we do not focus upon matters between two BRICS members. So we would not discuss a situation that occurs between China and India. Nevertheless, we do have bilateral engagements with each of the countries, and we've been encouraged by the signs of an attempt at reaching agreement between India and China. There have been discussions about how to improve the border conflict resolution issues that have occurred between the two. I know that in October and November, the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Minister Wang Yi and Minister Jaishankar of India, had a meeting, and that this is a matter that is being discussed between the two countries, whereas 3 years ago, when this matter emerged on the public stage, the two countries were not talking to each other. So the fact that the foreign ministers have met and announced to the world that this matter is being discussed is an encouraging sign for us. On the mutual legal assistance, again, we provide assistance to the Justice and Correctional Services Department, and they are the ones who would report on what progress is being made. We did receive the request from Botswana, and as per procedure, we transmitted it to the appropriate department in South Africa, and it is being addressed by the Department of Justice and Correctional Services. Well, the recognition by the United States, actually, of Morocco's sovereign right over Sahrawi doesn't have force and effect, because it is essentially a recognition of an illegality. United Nations resolutions have confirmed the situation of occupation, and the fact of something being said by the United States of America does not change the legal position of the United Nations resolutions. So we will continue to indicate that we believe the United States is wrong in this assertion. It doesn't go along with the multilateral bodies and global recognition of the position of occupation, and therefore it's something that we just find totally surprising, and as I say, it has no force and effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I believe that was the last question. Remember, confirmation. Great. Thank you very much to everybody who's been following this briefing on the social media pages, on television and on radio. And you will hear from us in the new year. As we begin the year, we'll once again invite you to outline our program for the year when the occasion presents itself. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Deputy Minister and Director General. Thank you for making the time. And that's the end of our briefing.
Thank you to all of you, and please have a lovely festive season. Wear your masks, maintain social distance, and don't go to rages and raves.
Yes. The same goes for you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.